There's Paul McStay. Paul McStay with the open goal. 21 minutes into the second half. The Celtic end goes wild.
And they gave us James McRory and Paul McStay. They gave us Johnston, Tully, Murdoch, Gold and Hay. And most of the football greats have passed through Parkhead's gates. But to play football the Glasgow Celtic way. And they played football the Glasgow Celtic way.
Hello and welcome to the Celtic Ray podcast. My name is Stephen Ray. I'm your host, and this week I'm joined, as I was last week, by Kevin McColgan. How you doing, Kev?
Not too bad yourself?
I'm doing all right. I was saying just before we came on, I was away picking something up for my missus today, and I've come home with a sore throat. So I hope I've not got the old COVID. And
or else you'll be getting some stern words from Nicola Sturgeon. No podcast for 14 days.
Aye, she'll be banning me for a fortnight.
You'll be having a strongly worded call from Jason Leach any minute, I imagine.
Oh man, if there's any guy who's made a mint out of this whole period, it's him, innit?
Oh God, what a speech he gives sometimes, I tell you. But fair play, I mean, he's got to be doing it. So he does say the right thing, so you can't really complain.
He's managed to bag himself a gig on that off the ball for the last 5-6 months.
Well, he says he's a football fan, but he looks the furthest thing from a football fan, if you know what I mean. He doesn't really look like a guy.
I think he might be an Airdrie fan, so he's definitely not a football fan.
No, well, I suppose that's incurable, I suppose. But
right, so we'll just dive right in. This week we actually have a game to really talk about, or a game that's just happened. Obviously, we were at home the other night to Reykjavik in the Champions League first round. I'll quickly just run through the team and we'll take it from there. So obviously we started with Barkas in goal. Elhamed came in. Julian Beaton came in for Ayer. Taylor, Brown, McGregor, Forrest, Christie, Elyounoussi and Edward. Was there any surprises in there for you in that lineup?
Well, I think the surprise, first and foremost, was Elhamed coming in for Frimpong. I thought he would have just been consistent with keeping Frimpong on the pitch, but it was also at the same time good to see Elhamed coming in, and I thought he had a very good game. Got to obviously take the opposition stature into account. Also with Beaton as well, it was good to see him get back, and I thought he had a relatively easy game and largely untroubled. I
think there was a point in the game where he had a ball right over the top of him. He got caught underneath it.
Apart from the odd thing like that, there wasn't too much I would say that I would call him out over. Shall we say?
Nah, I think right for the get go, I think you could tell within the first minute that this was going to be pretty easy stuff at the pace that Celtic had started, and the pace and the power and just the directness, I suppose, that you could tell that they were never going to be able to handle it. It was just a matter of how many.
It did get to that stage. I mean, I must admit, I thought with everything that was going on and no game being played, I thought we might have been almost a bit rusty, but after the first goal, you just knew that there would be a couple more after it, and it was a good way to finish off what was been a turbulent few days.
I think the players might have been, you've seen the interview with Jerry McCulloch had done with Scott Brown that was on Premier Sports. It was Premier Sports, but officially it was Celtic TV that was being shown. And obviously Brown, he was obviously asked a question, and I would like to think that he was told what questions was going to be asked, but you could tell that he was pretty raging about the situation with Bolly. It basically said, we're all suffering for the mistake of one guy.
Mm-hmm. He certainly didn't defend him, and you can tell, because sometimes, I suppose there is no way to defend that, but with Brown, sometimes it's a wee bit more laid back, his interview style, but with this one, certainly you could tell that he was certainly putting it out there that he was very, very annoyed.
I think, I was going to say with Scott Brown, there must be two Scott Browns. There's the Scott Brown who gets interviewed before and after games, and then there must be the guy who's away for the camera, because he's one of these guys, and he was on Sky Sports during the lockdown. He's very, I don't know, he's very generic sort of footballer speak, if you know what I mean. It's all, how would I put it? It's, you ask him a question and it's very, we're ready for the game kind of thing. It's nothing, it doesn't give you much insight, if you know what I mean. It's very bland interview style he's got, whereas Callum McGregor's quite, I don't know, he's got a bit about him in interviews. He's quite articulate. No, I'm not saying Brown's not articulate, but he gives you a bit more in the interview.
He certainly has a bit more charisma, I would say.
I think that's it. Aye.
And then when you look at Brown, and it's good the way that Brown reacts when they're lining up, they show you them in the tunnel, and he does not give anything away. He'll not be shaking the hands before it, or good game. It's very much monotone, same look in the face throughout the game. There's very much nothing given away. But I think it's good to have that sort of captain. That's the way I'd like him to be. I don't want to be nicey. That's just not the way a captain should be acting. That's certainly my opinion on that.
I think what I was really sort of aiming for is he's the kind of guy who would always stick up for his teammates no matter what. If somebody gets sent off, he would just go, "Oh, it's one of those things," generic sort of answer. But he just was not,
Oh, no.
He threw him under the bus without actually throwing him, actually saying it. You could tell he was fuming. And I think that maybe helped the actual team, because obviously they came off a pretty poor performance away at Kilmarnock, and then they've gone into this game and they've just blown this team away completely.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see that obviously, I know that they came off of a small outbreak, a small localised outbreak, and they'd only played their first game in 2 weeks on the Friday before it. But you could certainly tell that after the second goal that they were just not trying, and they were just literally just trying to keep it as low as they could. And as Hartson said throughout the commentary, that they really were poor opposition.
Do you think the goalkeeper looked like the new guy on one of the big boats in Deadliest Catch?
I must admit, my dad was like, he said he looked like something like that, but I don't know if it was Deadliest Catch, but he says he's got a face I recognise, but it's probably that programme he was talking about. But I tell you, he was the only one that was keeping him in it at times. I
think they call it a greenhorn. It's like the new guy. It's been brought onto the boat fishing for crabs and stuff like that. He just didn't look like a football player. He just had that. I don't know. He looked as if he belonged somewhere else.
I think there was a few of them that I think the fitness levels left a lot to be desired, if truth be told, and the fact that they're the Icelandic champions leaves a lot to be desired about the level of Icelandic football.
Aye, I mean, let's be fair, they're part-time and they're probably running into the wind every day, so,
Or kicking the ball into the sea, probably.
Aye, so obviously first goal comes, it's within the first couple of minutes, it's a long ball by Julien, a brilliant long ball, and that's what I like about Lennon sometimes, is we can go, he will mix it up and go direct, and also it was a brilliant sort of running first touch by El Younousi, and he's obviously took it around the fisherman goalkeeper and stuck it away pretty comfortably. And I think for that minute, any thoughts of red imps or any of these type of mad games that we've had in the past, I think just went right out the window, didn't it?
Yeah, I think even the fact of the matter for me was we were at home, so I wasn't uncomfortable with the game at all. I knew we would win. I just didn't think it'd be that quick we would get the first goal, just given what had going on. But as you say, what a cracking ball by Julian, and the run from El Younousi, and that first touch just to get it away, and and hopefully we get to see more of that El Younousi coming into the season now, and hopefully he carries that into Saturday at a tough venue.
Yeah. So the next goal from memory was the Edwards stroke own goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to give it as an own goal, because I don't think it was Edwards' touch on that.
I think he was still looking for the ball when it was nestling in the back of the net, and then he's kind of walked away smiling as if it was his end.
That's what we're doing with that. He just looked a bit bewildered, as if he didn't know where he was for a minute, and then just, I'll take the ball, I'll take the goal. But any striker's going to do that, so I don't mind if they gave him it, but I don't think they did. Certainly on Celtic TV, they never gave him it. They put it down as an own goal.
Yeah, it's definitely an own goal. But again, I think it was from memory good wing play from El Hamid, I think.
Yep. I think he played the ball in, and that's a good thing about El Hamid's game. Hopefully, we get to see more of it. And it was a good ball in, and essentially, I think Edward got the first touch, and then it hit off the defender, if my memory serves me right. And
I don't even think it hit Edward, to be honest. I think it just hit the guy's heel and bounced off his other leg and went in. So, El Hamid's a brilliant player, though.
It needs to be said. I hope it'll bring us on to a question like for Saturday. But with a performance like that, I mean, I would be wanting to start him, going forward for a few games just to see how he gets on, because I think he deserves it with given that's happened, because he is a good player. As we spoke last week, he's definitely in the bracket of the 10 million player if he played every single game. But obviously, injuries hamper him in that respect.
I think, and I've heard other people say it, and I totally agree, El Hamid is probably a 15 to 20 million pound player if he had a better injury record.
Yeah.
If he was somebody that had this sort of injury sort of free reign like Callum McGregor has, where he's just never injured, this guy's not playing for Celtic, this guy's playing Serie A, La Liga, somewhere like that, for a top team, I think, because I think he's just cool, he's calm, he defends well, he's solid, he's
not exactly. He's not got the flair or the speed of Frimpong. He just gets on with his job and does it correctly.
He's just a brilliant defender. And I mean, whether it's a right back or in a three, I don't know if I've ever played with him in a back two or the two as one of the two centre halves. But he's definitely a brilliant player. And I think, as much as I think Frimpong's a really exciting talent, I just think El Hamid is just the complete sort of player for that position. That's in my opinion.
I think he's got to start more this season, which I think he will, given, as we've said, he stays injury free. Because we can't just rely on Frimpong, because knowing what we would do, he'll get a bad injury from and then we'll be left without anybody. So I think it's good to have the two options. Both are very good players. So I think I would say I'd like to see more of El Hamid starting. I don't think we should just try and run Frimpong into the ground the same way that we maybe were guilty of with doing it with Tierney.
Yeah.
Because I think there was suspect. I mean, the amount of games that Tierney was certainly up there on the par with McGregor, but I think Tierney had to do a lot more running in that respect, given his role as a left back and bombing up and down.
I think the thing with McGregor is he didn't really start to become a regular playing week in, week out until he was at 23, 24. I know he broke into the Celtic team at 22 after being at Notts County, but it wasn't until maybe sort of late on in Dyla's second season that he started to sort of hold down a regular position, because he came into the team, burst onto the seam, scoring goals, and then he fell away quite quickly for a while, and then he came back.
I remember that in Dyla's first season. He had the goal against Reykjavik, then he scored the goal against Warsaw and against Maribor. Then I think he didn't have the best of games in Maribor at the return leg at home, and then I think, as you say, fell apart. But aren't we glad that he's there, because he's a cracking player, and he's like the boiler room player. He does the mopping up, and it's very good to see. But also can get forward, and I like the way that he gets forward sometimes. Yeah,
well, the reason I was mentioning that about his age and sort of breaking into the team, you find that these guys like Tierney, who start really young, in sort of late teens, and then they're in every week in, week out, their career seems to cut short, and they seem to be plagued with injuries through their 20s. I always remember Michael Owen being a bit like that. 16-year-old broke in, playing every week for Liverpool, playing for England, tournaments through the summer, and then by the time he was, he had a couple of bad injuries, and he just never recovered. Really, I think he retired at 31, 32. And the guy had all the talent in the world, but he burnt out too early. And Wayne Rooney was a wee bit like that. I know he's still playing for Derby, but there's... I
suppose even the same could be said for the original Ronaldo, because he burst onto the scene with PSV relatively young and broke the goal scoring records for them, and then went on to Barcelona and had a fantastic season. I think he was still very, very young, even younger than McGregor, if I'm being honest. But then went to the World Cup and then had that weird episode, whatever you want to call it, and then had a really bad couple of knee injuries with Inter, and it was
We've
But
definitely diverted off the subject here. So why is Christopher Julian so dominant in our position's penalty boxes, but not so in his own when he's up against big, hardy strikers? Or so people would have you believe. Because obviously he's absolutely bullied and blasted that header right in the top corner for the corner kick to make it 3.
It reminded me, that header, it reminded me of what we were talking about last week with a certain Stan Varga, the way he would bullet a header home. That's what it just totally reminded me of.
Yeah, it was quite like the one away to Milan.
Exactly, and he just rose up, full neck power into it, and bang, an absolutely great goal. Again, got to maybe say the opposition, but still, at the same time, it was a great header. But it does pose a certain question, I suppose, with regards to Julian and not being as dominant, shall we say. But he'll be breathing a sigh of relief, I imagine, now that Lyndon Dykes is away to QPR.
Yeah, aye.
I think he probably had a party for him,
Well, I was having an argument with somebody. It's quite like me, to be fair. It just seems to have become the sort of the norm for people to say Julian doesn't handle big, tall, hardy strikers. From memory, he's had 2 pretty poor games against Lyndon Dykes, and then obviously had that half against Kilmarnock last week. But I thought in the second half he total control, was never in any danger or anything. But it's just became the chat and all the phone-ins and stuff that Julian's, Celtic need a big rough and ready centre half. I think the problem is him and I are pretty similar, in the way they play. They're quite cultured football players. Julian's definitely more dominant, especially in the opposition's box. Ayer seems to go from 6'8" to 5'8" when he's jumping for, to try and score.
And you've also, sometimes Julian won't dribble as much as I think as Ayer would. Ayer likes to take the ball on a run, sometimes doesn't take the ball with him.
Yeah.
But I would agree with they're very, very similar. But it's the same with anything with phone-ins. One person says an opinion and everybody latches on to it as if it's their own.
Well, Hugh Keevins made. I think he's had a bee in his bonnet about Julian for the time where he didn't play against Cluj at home, and he was going on about, he's signed £7 million player and he's not ready, and Celtic are out the Champions League, and ever since then he's had it in for Julian regardless of what he's done, whether it's away to Lazio or the cup final against Rangers, where he pretty much held that defence together as best he could, so, and then obviously scores the winner. But I think out of the 40 plus games that Julian's played, if there's 5 pretty poor ones in there, I'll take that, because Celtic, haven't always had the best centre backs. We did have periods where we've had sort of good centre backs, but we're not going to be able to get the guys that just can't, that one mistake every 20 to 30 games. We can't afford the guys. The guys are 40-50 million pound,
Exactly, but as you say, for the price that we've paid for him, if he's going to make a couple of mistakes, you're going to have to just take that off with a smooth.
Yeah. Well, speaking of centre halves, and obviously speaking of Ayer, he didn't look happy sitting in the stand, not playing, and obviously Beaton was in for him. Were you surprised at that sort of selection?
I was surprised to see Beaton in. Not that I say I would have forgotten about him, but I just thought it was certainly an important game, obviously Champions League, and I think there was just the slight assumption that we would go through. So obviously it was maybe just to give Ayer a rest, but I think it's good to see there been a wee bit of rotation even this early in the season, in my opinion, because obviously without Beaton we would just have pretty much Ayer and Julian playing all the time. And Beaton, I think, has proved time and again, certainly throughout the last season, that he can play in that position, albeit it's maybe not his favourite position, but it is literally just one position down from where he normally is as a defensive midfielder. Yeah. And I think the games that he's came in, and I think he came in, and I think I said this last week, I think he came in the Lazio game, didn't he, for the injured El Hamid?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's potentially one of the biggest games of the season at that time last season, and he held his own. I can't really fault him.
Did he not come on for Ayer at Ibrox when we won 2-0? Or did he start that game? Was Ayer injured? But I just remember Beaton playing in that game and absolutely strolling it. And would you call him, Julian just mopped every header, every challenge up. He just ate Defoe that day, big time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
And then obviously
I think
Morelos
he
came on.
started that. If I'm just, I'll need,
Yeah.
I'll need to troll the archives for that one.
But I think Beaton, I think he's better in a 3. I think he does get caught out sort of with the ball over the top a wee bit. But he's the kind of guy that allows the other 2 centre backs to sort of just concentrate and defending, because he's passing and his calmness on the ball is just second to none, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's sort of a backup centre half, because sometimes that's required, I suppose.
And also a good player to have at your disposal, I would say. And also, he's not bad for a shot sometimes, which sometimes the game requires. Some crackers he scored against Kilmarnock and Dundee and Hamilton. Being a bit further forward.
So the next goal, talk me through it. It's early in the second half, isn't it?
Early in the second half, yeah. It was a really good goal, I thought. It was
Craig Taylor right on the line.
How do we start it? I mean, it was the way he even headed the ball was literally just weird. And you've seen everybody going to him and saying, "By the way, how did you headle that?" Because he must be about 4 foot nothing, almost. But
it's almost as if he headed it on the way down, as if he jumped for it a wee bit too early, I think. And
the heading style was a little bit all over the place. But he did get the goal, and it was good to see. And even Lennon, you could see going, well done, a nice round of applause for the worst header of the season so far.
El made a wee comment in one of the sort of press, just making the point that even Taylor scored.
Yeah,
he obviously doesn't get much in training either.
No, but I mean, you don't expect him to get much in, and certainly not a header with regards to that. But it was another good ball from El Hamid. You've got to say it. It was another good assist.
I was going to say, after that goal, Encham comes on for Scott Brown. Is that going to be the sort of norm in this season moving forward? Brown sort of not playing full games, or maybe not even starting games, maybe just coming on for the last 10-15.
It could be the new favourite sub of Lennon, where last year it was Johnny Hayes coming on.
Right.
It could be that favourite sub. But I think when Encham came on, he still looked as if he was strolling it, and some of the passing he was making, you couldn't fault his performance when he came on. And
he had the slippers and a cigar out, didn't he?
Pretty much. He was reading a paper, I think, as well at the same time. But it just makes me feel and want them to play more, because he does look to have certainly came on a bit, and certainly in the whole of the pre-season, I think he's shown that he deserves to be starting a couple of games.
Yeah.
I think, maybe more than a couple of games.
I think in the game against PSG, he looked like the one player that we had that belonged in that company.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and I'm not having a dig at Christie, and I'm not writing him off or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but Christie in that game, he looked like a Scottish football player, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He was all energy, but there was no any real quality there. Whereas Encham he oozes class and quality. And I know there's an inconsistency argument about him, but unless you get 10-15 games, how can you get consistent? So that's kind of my argument
with that.
Yeah. So the board's going up, and Edward, who I thought had a pretty quiet game considering the opposition, he's also thought, I've fucking better do something here, and decided to pick the ball up and beat the whole team practically, and slipped it under the goalie, and that was his final touch of the game. That's just class, wasn't it?
It was a fantastic, majestic goal. I mean, how he did get through about 4 or 5 players is incredible. And then I think if you watch the Celtic TV unique angle, which I think is a great wee video to watch with the goals, I think it's McGregor that you can actually say, "Oh my God," as he just gets through.
That's the only good thing about having no crowd. You can actually hear some of the shit that they say.
It's as if going, "Oh my God," and you can actually. Now, I've watched the other angle, and you see McGregor just applauding him as he turns away. And okay, people will say that the opposition was the opposition, but he still had to get past the players, and I tell you, he done it majestically, and it was a fantastic goal.
I had I was reading comments under the Premier Sports. Obviously, they tweeted it out and was basically saying, "Oh my God," kind of thing. And there was a couple of comments for the English, usual part of, Farmers League and check the state of the SPL defenders. And I just responded to them saying, this is actually the Champions League. So
see, that's another thing. Where the pub league commenters, shall we say, they just leap on anything, and it'd be the same with. I think Adrian Durham would have even called it a terrible goal, just the way he responds sometimes. But they just don't take it into account that if it was their player, and let's say it was Harry Kane doing that against, it'd be spoke about for months on end.
I know. I'm just going to say something here that I've got 2 dogs, right? One's a Chihuahua and one's a King Charles Spaniel. The King Charles is getting a wee bit old, and he's started in the last couple of weeks just randomly barking at my wife, and I don't know why. So I heard him in the background. So if anybody hears that and thinks that there's some sort of dog cruelty going on in the background, there's definitely not. And if anybody walks past the house with another dog, the Chihuahua goes absolutely apeshit. So I've said to my wife, going to do your best to keep them quiet the night, because they can go nuts and it does my head in. So I heard in the background and I thought, I hope that doesn't pick up.
But I never heard it, so
that's fine.
Okay.
So obviously we get into the final minutes, and Cham picks a pass. I think he slips it through about 3 or 4 players at a ridiculous angle, and there was literally a yard that he had gap that he could have put it through to get it right onto El Yunusi, and he found it. And see, if you're going to watch that goal, that goal should be played to Barry White music. It is absolute sexual. Honestly, it is absolutely tremendous. I
must admit, it was a fantastic through pass, and as you say, it was quite an angle that he got it through. But I mean, it was absolutely pinpoint to his feet, And I actually thought it was a jetty that he got it to.
I thought at the very first glance, I thought it was a jetty, but obviously it wasn't. It was El Yunusi.
It's a little remarkably similar, and I thought, oh, brilliant, that's a jetty, and it was an El. Not that I was unhappy that El Yunusi got it, but I think it just proves that that there is certainly scope for Cham to be starting, because passes like that against weaker opposition teams, he surely can do it maybe against the Dundee Uniteds and the St Johnstone and Aberdeens of this world, So, and I it just gets back to that. I would like to see him starting more. And
it kind of made. It was one thing. Celtic had switched to a diamond, and El Yunusi was playing in behind a jetty when he came on, and obviously Klamala.
Mm-hmm.
And El Yunusi said in an interview just recently that obviously they were talking about bringing a jetty in, that he had played as a 10 at Bal behind a jetty before, and it made me think, is that potentially a position that he could take up? Because I think somebody ran stats, and I know people go nuts at all these stats and XGs and all that sort of stuff, and I'm no massive into stats myself, but apparently Christie has been, when you compare him from as a 10 to whenever he's played out left, he's actually been more productive out left, because he has got a cracking left foot and he can swing across and stuff like that, and he's really hard working. So I just don't think his passing's the best, and I just think, with the link up play and stuff, I think maybe being out wide would suit him, and El Yunusi moving in is the 10 potentially.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, certainly it gets back to what we were saying. Obviously, Lennon's only ever really tried Christie on the right. On the right, sorry, and then moved Forrest onto the left sometimes. Now, I don't know if that would be a good idea for Christie, because I think Christie, as you say, has dropped a little, but I would just like to maybe see him improve it quite a bit more, because he's certainly not set the heather on fire with any game that I've seen him in this short space of time that we've had. Certainly compared to
Christie, I think this calendar year, I think he's been poor since probably the Rangers game where he missed a penalty. I mean, people have said to me, but what about all the goals he scored in the previous year? And I'm like, but you can't
compare it.
If a player's off form, he's off form, and sometimes it's best to take them out and sort of ease them back into it again, because you're not doing them any favours, I don't think. And I know Brown's been the one that people have spoken about that maybe should come out for Incham. I think Incham is a central midfielder. I don't think he's a number 10. But it's hard to justify Christie's position at the minute, I think.
Well, that will bring me on to something we'll talk about with the potential of maybe Rogic going. Because I think Christie seems to be the mainstay of this role, and I just think if we were to sell Rogic, it would be bad, because I think Rogic gives you something just a little bit more different than Christie. He seems to find space a wee bit more, whereas Christie seems to just be excuse me, he will just sometimes hope for the best is the best way to put it. Whereas, I just think maybe he just needs, I know they've had a long break, but maybe he just needs to kind of almost start again.
We'll move on to ins and outs in a wee minute. I just wanted to sort of just quickly talk about the upcoming opponents for next Wednesday night in the next round. So Ferencváros, I think is what they're called, from Hungary. They're quite a famous team from back in the day. Obviously, Hungarian football was massive sort of in the 50s and the 60s, but obviously the last sort of 20, 30 years, not so. So they're quick sort of history lesson on them. They were founded in 1899. They're from Budapest. In the 64-65 season, they won the Old Fairs Cup, which became eventually the UEFA Cup, where they beat Juventus 1-0. They lost the Fairs Cup final a few years later in 68 against Leeds. And then in the mid-70s, 74-75, they lost the Cup Winners' Cup final to Dynamo Kiev. They play in green and white, which is means that they'll need to find another colour strip to find, because there's definitely a clash in, I think, both their strips, to be honest. And they've won 31 titles, 23 cups. They've only had one game this season in the league, and they drew one each with MTK Budapest. So, we quick history lesson on them. I think if Celtic have any aspirations of being, considered a team that can do a bit of damage in Europe, this is the kind of games we have to be winning. We're at home as well. It's a one-off. There's no away goals, nothing like that. It's just a straight shootout. So
yeah. I mean, if you look at the team Ferencváros, that'll be my best pronunciation of it tonight. I've been trying to think of the best way to pronounce it for the whole day, because I know it's going to come up at some point, and then I've just had to wing it. So I do apologise for anybody if they want to slag me, go for it, because I still don't know about it. But last year they got to the group stages of the Europa League in a group containing Espanyol, Ludogorets, Razgrad and CSKA Moscow. Now they got one victory away from home at CSKA Moscow and managed to finish third with 7 points. So there's certainly no bugs, and I think it will be a tougher game. But yeah, if we've got any aspirations to go anywhere, and you have to be winning at least the first and the second round with ease, in my opinion.
I think where the two-legged tie really stuffs us is I think we worry too much about the away goals, and I think we've been caught with the away goals. We've been kind of stuck in that no man's land. With the Maribor game, we were going through it 0-0, but we put on more strikers to try and win the game. We end up losing it. Because you want to get that goal just to cover yourself with the away goal. Also, we had that with Cluj last year where we were ahead, and then but the away goal just kills us.
And it was the away goals.
And then obviously again with Copenhagen with the same. With the away goals pretty much killed us, and the game was gone. So I think as a one-off shootout at home, I think Celtic's got to be clear favourites for this.
I would say so, because they were in as I say, back to what they were saying, they were in the group stages, but this is that was their first appearance in a few years, I think. And only then they've kind of hovered about the second, third round at most. But I think you play the same team, you're going to win. That is my honest opinion. I don't see there being much problems, but I do see it being a lot closer. And if it is 1-0 or if it is 2-1, I will take it. But
Yeah.
it's one of them games you would be expected to win.
Well, it's one. I remember the Astana game a few years ago when we got we scored in the sort of last couple of minutes with the penalty with Dembele, and we're 2-1 up.
Mm-hmm.
But we've still got another 3 or 4 minutes, hanging by a knife edge with the away goals thing. We had it with Karagandhi as well. One goal just kills us, So I think the fact that if we go one down, there's not a real desperation, with because of our away goals rule. It's we've got the full 90 minutes to just win the game.
Which I can see happening. As I say, I don't really have too much doubts about it. Certainly there'll be a wee bit more of a just nerves as with any game in Europe, because you just never know how games are going to go. But you make a good point about the away goals rule. It has caught us out on several occasions. But I know this will never stay, but I am certainly a fan of the one-legged ties.
And you're only saying that because we've had 2 home legs drawn.
But I think with anything, these one-legged ties at any level where we've been watching the previous year's competition, which is still being played now, and this way, I think that it certainly brings more excitement.
Yeah.
Even if it was home or away, because there's some games where you win 6-0 there at the weekend and during the week, and you're almost like, so we need to play this game, even though the game is pretty much over.
Yes.
And it can bring us almost almost do we have to,
Then it works the other way where you've stunk the place out, you've lost 2-0 away to Karagandhi and you bring it home and you win 3-0. So there's always that. But how are you? Obviously you've just touched on it. Do you like the format, the Champions League at the minute, the one-legged ties, maybe in one country or sort of one city, playing out all the games? Do you like that format for the sort of latter stages?
I've certainly enjoyed it. Yeah, I think it brings a lot more excitement to the games with regards to. I think the players do tend to almost just go for it, and I think the scorelines have reflected that. But I don't think anybody saw the Bayern Munich Barcelona score coming. Certainly not to that scale. But
I watched that game delayed, and so I managed to record it, avoid the result. I put my phone in the kitchen and I just put the game on. And actually, sometimes when I'm watching a live game, I end up, if something's not catch my eye, I end up turning to my phone. But this game, I just thought I'm just going to watch it, start to finish. Yeah. And it just had that Germany-Brazil feel about it after about 10 minutes.
Exactly. And that's what everybody was saying in the group chat we have. It was totally like Germany-Brazil, and it seemed to be the same players. Muller causing problems.
The guy's brilliant. So obviously that's Champions League sort of done with. I was going to move on to Dundee United, but I think I will probably come to that just briefly at the end, because it's just really talking about who we think should play and whatever. So we'll just move on to the ins and outs. So the big news this week is allegedly that Tam Rogic could be leaving Celtic for £4 million to the Middle East, Qatar. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly would be a big loss to the team, I think, as I've briefly spoke about. Certainly been about for a few years now. I did honestly think he would have been gone by now. I didn't think we'd be able to hold on to him for as long as we did. I think there was a period there where he was really a mainstay of the team, and I thought he would have been picked up by, in inverted commas, a bigger team at one point. But I find that, as I was saying, Christie appears to be the mainstay. I would have liked Rogic to be getting a wee bit more game time during the pre-season that we had, and it seems to be that I think, maybe just reading between the lines, he's not going to get it. So if someone comes a calling with a reasonable fee for Rogic, it seems to be accepted. But I've always been a big fan of Rogic in this respect that he could find space in a telephone box. Sometimes you'd have 2 or 3 players around about and they'd just find that yard of space, play that pass, and the play would be expanded again. I always thought he was very, very good for that.
Yeah, I think domestically, I think he's. I dug out some numbers last night. I think he's played, or he's appeared in the Celtic team over 50 times in the last 2 seasons, which I thought I was actually surprised at that. But I think he only completed 4 games last season, start to finish. Mm-hmm. And that's just, it's hard to justify that. People would say, he's not a Lennon type player. Well, it was Lennon that signed him in the first place, but you could argue the same about, Chris Commons wasn't a hard sort of, he wasn't a guy that would work his socks off. He was just a guy that would, pick up the ball, find space, find a good pass, or even shoot for distance and score and get a lot of goals. I think Tam Rogic is clearly, I think he's by far our best number 10, but his injuries and his lack of finishing games has just cost him big time, and I'm sure he's on a high wage as well, so I can understand the club. He's got 3 years to go. He's averaging 23 games in a 60-game season, over the period. He's probably on a big wage. He's probably hinting at moving himself. He's coming up for 28. I can understand the club making this move.
And also going to a club like Qatar, it will be a big payday for him. So
absolutely.
He gets back to it's a short career. He wants to do what he can do. Warmer climate, definitely in Qatar. But it could also be, I think I read someone's opinion on it on Twitter. It could be that maybe they're just freeing up money to maybe bring Shane Duffy in. Maybe.
Possibly.
It could be just trying to free up the wages or just a little bit of the funds to get there. But honestly, it would leave with my best wishes. He has been something of like the master of the last minute goal. With Motherwell, Kilmarnock and Aberdeen and I suppose Livingston. But that goal against Aberdeen in the 2017 Cup final will certainly live long in the memory, and I can still see the ball hit that net when he went in. I don't think he even hit it right. I
put that goal up there with the Bratback clinching the league title in the last day, it stopped at 10, and Larsson's late goal against Boa Vista away to put us in the UEFA Cup final. Two things that I never thought I'd see at the time. I got to a point where I never thought I'd see Celtic win a league again, and we did. And I never thought I'd see Celtic reach a European final, after what happened the previous 10, 12 years. So to see Celtic win a treble undefeated, the pressure on the club and the team that day was just unbelievable. And just the fact that he's picked the ball up 40 odd yards for goal. I think it was Armstrong, it played it to him.
Yep.
He's running towards goal. A crack of lightning happens above the stadium just as he's getting round the last sort of defender of Aberdeen, and it's just bedlam. It's a moment that will live with me forever. I'll never ever forget it. The guy's it's just, see if that was all he ever did for Celtic, he would go down in folklore as a legend. And for me, it's a legendary moment. It will be talked and spoke about forever.
It is a great goal. I was behind the goal that day, and the rain was terrible because we had a really hot week that week, if I remember, and the weather was fantastic. And then we come to Cup final day, and it's absolutely pissing down with rain.
I got in just in time that day before the heavens opened, and I was I think I was in the 5th or 6th row down at the corner flag. So when he hit that, the ball was coming towards me, and we seen it hit the net, and just it was just mayhem. It was bedlam. My son ended up about 10 rows behind me and stuff like that. It was mental. He was just getting tossed about.
We had managed to get tickets, me, old Joe and Danny, one of my best friends beside us, and I tell you, I think old Joe, we must have nearly choked him to death when that goal went in. I'm just glad he's alive, put it that way, because I think he was a little bit scared after the reaction that we gave him. But honestly, what a goal.
Yeah, obviously, you mentioned a couple others, like the goal against Motherwell after, it was a back and forward game, Celtic 2 down, and then then 3-2 down, and then winning at 4-3, right at the death. And obviously that game at Kilmarnock where Aberdeen had the potential of going top of the league that day with not that many games to go. If we drew that game, and obviously he's picked, I think there's a brilliant footage of a fan videoed for behind the goal. You just hear him shouting, "Hit it, big man," as he's turning. But he's got that ability to take the ball half turned, and I just don't. Apart from maybe in Cham and possibly McGregor, there's nobody else in our team that have got that ability. And I think he's a really talented player, but I think he's struggled a bit in Europe. I think the pace of the game. I remember the game against, I think it was Leipzig, possibly, that he struggled at times, and I think he had a good game against Man City in the 3-each game, but I don't think he's set the heather alight in Europe, but definitely domestically, he's legend status. And if he decides to go and the club get decent money for him and reinvest it, then by all means, if that's what has to happen. Because if he's not getting a game, he's too good a player not to just be sitting on his arse not doing anything.
He certainly contributed to the cause There is no doubt about that, and I do think if he's wanting games, I don't think he's going to get it here. So I think it is that the writing is on the wall essentially. But if it is to be reinvested, then good. But it's whether or not it will get reinvested.
Yeah, part of me thinks that money's to cover some of the outlay we've had already. So we'll see. And obviously, there was another link. Obviously, that's a player out potentially, but there was another player linked today. It was in I know it was in a Daily Record, and you can't always go with what they say, but apparently they're claiming that Celtic have made a $5 million bid for a Trabzonspor player called Caleb Ekuban, I think his name is. Ekuban. Aye, he's 26 years old, born in Italy, plays for Ghana. In his career, he's had 219 appearances, 49 goals. He actually played for Leeds in 2017-2018. He had 21 appearances, but he'd only had a couple of goals in the Championship. In the last couple of seasons, he's had 64 appearances with Trabzonspor with 17 goals. So it doesn't exactly sound the kind of player that we need, I think, because Ajeti seems to be a player that we've brought in that is, powerful, out-and-out striker, sort of penalty box kind of guy. I don't know. Does that if we're constantly being linked with him, if we're being linked with this guy and then still getting linked with the guy Tony, who apparently is not back Brentford, is that say more about Lee Griffiths rather than Edward potentially?
It could very possibly well, but then I was looking at Ekuban's stats, and as you say, it does not set the heather on fire. And if you look at his teams that he's been with, relatively unknown teams.
Yeah.
There's not many teams apart from Leeds and Trabzonspor that he's at now, but his most prolific season is 17 goals and 34 appearances with Partizani Tirana. Now,
I have no idea where they're from. I was hoping you were going to say Belgrade, but
Well, I had a quick look, but I didn't find where the location of the team was. But if that is his most prolific season, as you say, I don't know if that's where we should be spending £5 million.
Yeah.
£5 million for a Jetty or whatever it is certainly looked to be justified with his stats back that up to a certain degree, and obviously the proof will be in the pudding when it comes to it and when he gets more game time. But I would rather be spending £5 million somewhere else instead of on Ekuban. He's certainly not for me. And looking at a lot of loans moves in there as well.
Yeah, it just I'm going to file it under pish if I'm honest. But it was in the paper, so that's why I thought I'd write it down and do some stats on him. So there's no, obviously we know what we need. We need a centre back. We probably need somebody to challenge Forrest. Whether that overtakes Forrest, I never really have a problem. Whether it's to replace somebody as long as they're better, or at least can push Forrest, on further. I think so. A right winger, and I think potentially a number 10.
Mm-hmm.
If Rogic's going, then you need somebody. And obviously we've been linked with the boy at Motherwell.
Yeah, and Turnbull as well. Yeah, and I've got no problems taking Turnbull. I would like to give the boy a chance, assuming that his injury worries are over.
Yeah, well, he was in the building last year and he had the strip on and sitting with the manager, and it all fell apart, didn't it? So
one of the weirdest drawn out sagas as well. Yeah. I think that can be filed under that. I certainly would like, if he was to come in under Christie and certainly with the promise of some game time, I think that would be, I would be more up for spending that sort of money. Maybe not £5 million, but I'd certainly be wanting to spend it on someone who at least knows the game a little bit, and Turnbull would fit that perception. Yeah,
I think the days of, is this a sort of change in policy for Celtic? The sort of 45 million might become the new 1 to 2 million. I think we've had too many failures at the 1 to 2 million in recent years. I think guys like Boyata or Van Dijk or I think these kind of guys, or Wanyama, when we were picking them up for sort of 1 to 3, sort of £2.5 million, I think these guys are now £5 to £6 million.
It is just the going rate, I think, nowadays. I mean, because if players like, and I know I've said them again, but if players like Harry Maguire are going for 80 million and Rich Harlison a couple of years ago going for nearly 75 million, then what are players like Boyata in their day? Like, it is just that we move up almost a step with spending money. So it would have been that Richarlison would have probably been only maybe worth 20 or 30 when we were picking up the Boyatas and the Van Dijks.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's like, well, in order to get that player again, we have to then go up a grade. And I think it will just keep going up until eventually the bubble's got to burst.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Richarlison, because one of the comments under Edward's goal on the Premier Sports Twitter page was, he was clearly an Everton fan, and he just wrote, "Imagine this guy playing alongside Richarlison." So I just quoted his tweet saying, "We don't need Richarlison."
Well, certainly for 75 million, there's not much I've seen for Richarlison that would certainly want me to part with that amount of money. But that is another story and an absolute another discussion for another day, with the amount of money that's been spent on players down there.
Yeah, so ins and outs has been fairly quiet this week, so we'll move on to the next subject, and I've got that written down as KT, Kieran Tierney. He's been in the news a wee bit this week. He's been on social media, and he's been on Open Goal and Super Scoreboard. I'll be honest, I've not listened to the Super Scoreboard interview yet, and I don't generally watch the Open Goal because it's just the Scottish soccer AM for me, and it's just stories about getting pished. It is what it is. It's a lad's kind of, dressing room banter type thing.
It does appeal to a certain crowd, and it seems to have its popularity. But if it's popular, then why not?
Aye. So it's just Simon. I can't take Simon Ferry serious with that voice.
That's the Dorian accent.
So you got pished, and Lennon was a bit raggy. That's my aye. But I've not listened to any, but obviously I've seen comments about saying that he'd be worried about coming back to Celtic Park, and and obviously somebody had wrote Judas no far from his house. This is where I'm on guys like Kieran Tierney. It doesn't bother me. When we lost Van Hooijdonk, Cadet, and Di Canio on the same summer, I think from that moment onwards, I never really attached myself to any players ever again. I just accept that when they're here, you want them to do well, but eventually they're going to leave. Whether they leave, retiring at the club, or leave because they get sold or contracts ran out, it doesn't bother me. For me, I just see these guys as, it's a job to them, and of course they can be supporters, and he was sort of prominent with a megaphone in front of the fans, but I think possibly Brendan Rodgers was in his ear and basically, saying to him, it's great, and it's, you want to be at your boyhood club for the rest of your days, but there's a big bad world out there, and and there's a lot of money to be made. It will set you and your family up for forever practically. So you're not going to get that at Celtic. You get good money at Celtic and you will be a millionaire, but it's no fuck you money. It's
I mean,
and that's just how I feel, and I don't have any issues. The guy made a career decision, and fair play to him. It seems to have worked out for him so far.
I mean, I must admit, when he did go, I was a bit annoyed, but not annoyed to the fact that I would go and spray paint Judas over in North Lanarkshire because of it. I would never have done that to anybody. I did think that there was a part of me that was a little bit annoyed because of the whole, prominent with a megaphone, I'm the fan, I'm just a fan that got lucky. But when you look at it, the bigger picture, he had pretty much achieved everything that he was going to achieve with Celtic. And as a short career, he has made a life-changing decision, because I imagine the money that he is on now at Arsenal will be not frightening, but it will be very, very healthy.
Allegedly, he's on over 70 grand a week.
For a boy from the North Lanarkshire to be on that, you've just got to say thanks for the memories and move on.
Yeah,
and it is good to see him do well. I don't think he should be scared to come back. That is certainly a poor opinion. Okay, I will happily admit I was very annoyed when we did leave, but that's only natural. You'll just be annoyed because it's almost like, well, who did we bring in? And then we brought in the world's greatest left back in Bolingoli.
I think that's what's more annoying, is the fact that we've replaced him with an absolute half-wit.
Yeah. But at the same time as well, these people that say, I think it's terrible, and okay, everybody's entitled to their opinion. This is what we're doing here, and we'll not always agree, but we'll not always agree with everybody else. You yes, you can certainly look at, well, he was bad for well, he was a fan, and it was this and it was that. But at the end of the day, he made us a very healthy profit, and he's certainly a product of the academy, which is what we certainly need to still be looking at. And for us,
he's set a high bar for future players to be sold.
Exactly, and for us to be using that blueprint is something that we need to concentrate on, because we don't have the money to be, spunking about 80 million on anybody and everybody, and that is, as you say, is a very high threshold to be held under, and hopefully it just motivates and pushes the players on, and hopefully we can get that again, because at the end of the day, we're going to be a selling club, and to make full 100% profit on them is a great piece of business, and at the end of the day, that's what it is.
As much as we've had some shanker signings, we've got these signings that whenever anybody comes chatting for an Edouard, we just turn around and say, listen, we've sold Van Dijk, he's the best defender in the world. We sold Kieran Tierney, number 1 left back at Arsenal, and we sold Moussa Dembele, who pumped one of your best teams out the Champions League and just played this Champions League semi-final. This is the market that we're selling. This is the type of players that we're attracting and beefing up, and we're not letting them go. We can justify the fees that we ask. And if we turn around and say we want 40 million for Edouard, we can justify it, because Moussa Dembele went probably too cheap for me. Kieran Tierney, he probably went slightly cheaper than I would have hoped, but it's still hard to get, above that kind of figure for Scottish players. So, and I think one thing it might have been said to Kieran Tierney under Brendan Rodgers, because we know what Brendan Rodgers is. He's a career type manager. There's no loyalty there, and I think he's probably come into the club and basically said, "Listen, when I arrived, you were by far the best left back in this country, and you were miles ahead of Andy Robertson. But now Andy Robertson's ahead of you because he made the move away out of Scotland." Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't know it for a fact, and I'm just guessing, but I can hear that being said to him, and all of a sudden Tierney's looking at Andy Robertson picking up Champions Leagues and Premier Leagues, and obviously he never picked up the Premier League, but finished second at that point. But they looked pretty odds on for the following season, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's looked at that, spoke to his family, and thought, you know what, I think it's time to move on. So I don't hold any grudges, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I will admit at the very start I was just very annoyed, because I thought, how are we going to replace him? But at the end of the day, I'm not going to, spray paint Judas at his home. I mean, that is just absolute idiotic behaviour. Wish him all the best. Still goes down as a fantastic player for Celtic. Gave his all every game. I think there was very rarely you could say that Tierney had a poor game, albeit maybe the last season when the injuries were kind of creeping up on him. But I certainly think he should not be scared to come back here, and if we are able to have any celebrations on the basis that we do win the magical number, then he should be welcomed back as an integral part of that.
So we'll move on to questions, Twitter questions. I'm sure KT will probably be in amongst us. So our first questions came from Liam J. McLaughlin at LarkyBoy85. So I'll do my best to read this and talk at the same time. I'm brilliant at reading, as in reading, but see actually reading it out, I'm fucking terrible, honestly. With Encham not looking like a starter anytime soon, do you think it will be a definite that he will be away in this transfer window? And if he leaves along with Rogic, do you think we would be an ideal replacement for the squad? I know I wouldn't get 2 players to replace them, which is why I asked for 1 player. Or who do you think would be an ideal replacement? I don't think Encham will leave this window now. I don't think he will. If Rogic's leaving, I definitely don't think Encham will leave. Watch this time tomorrow, he's gone, isn't he?
There'll be a £15 million bid accepted or something by Sunderland or something, no luck.
Yeah. I think we're short in centre midfield. I think Encham's a central midfielder. Sorrow we've not seen enough of to see if he's up to it. We're just 1 injury away from McGregor. I know he doesn't get injured very often, but the thought of having to replace McGregor, is just frightening for me. So to sell Encham, I think at this moment in time it's just not a no-go. But I do think we need another number 10 unless Moyele Newsy is going to move into that position. That's what I think. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think he'll leave. I would agree with you there. I don't think he will leave. I think there is certainly maybe discussions being going on that Ensham will get the time and come on as a natural replacement for Brown at times. I think if the two of them were to leave, it would be a disastrous decision. I don't think we would replace them in this window if that was the case. I think you would be lucky to have two players that would replace them, as what Larky Boy has said. I think if it isn't this season that Ensham gets the game time, he will look to engineer a move away. That's what I think.
There's absolutely no doubt. I think he's away next year anyway. So that's why I'm hoping that we get as much out of him this year, because I think there's a wonderful player in there. We're just not getting. I think the problem with Lennon, and this is my only irk with Lennon, I can't remember if I spoke about it last week. He's got this Martin O'Neill thing in him where he's got this tried and trusted kind of team lineup. Martin O'Neill had it. The team very rarely changed throughout the sort of 4 or 5 years. There was only the odd change here or there, but in the main, Martin O'Neill's team was pretty much the same from start to finish. And he relied on the same core of 12, 13 players all the time. And I think Neil Lennon's got a bit of that in him. And because Christie has worked hard and done really well for him, and he's sort of first, he's almost as if he's loath to drop him. And I just think this isn't the season for sentiment. I'm sorry. It's I think players need to be picked on form, and sometimes not necessarily picked on form, but different lineups and different setups for different situations, like playing on plastic pitches. Maybe change to a 3 at the back, or and a narrower midfield or whatever. But in the main, I think you can't just keep picking the same players. We're going to have another 60 odd games a season probably, and it's all going to come thick and fast. So yeah, the thought of losing Rogic and Encham is not great for me.
I would be inclined to agree with everything you've said there. I think Lennon had that in certainly his first spell as manager, whereby he would have his favourites and they would never be dropped, and you would just be expecting a wee change here and a wee change there just every few games, and it would never happen. It is just always, as you say, the tried and trusted with O'Neill. And maybe
I think that's why Forrest gets such a hard time, especially in his early years, that he would get injured, he'd be out for a few weeks, and then Lennon would throw him straight back in without, try to build him back up again, and then he'd be injured again and he'd be back out, and you just could never get that. I think when Brendan Rodgers came in, he didn't get Forrest in until he was 100% fully fit, and obviously had Paddy Roberts breathing down his neck as well to try and get the best out of him. So, and he played obviously Brown in the Copenhagen game, half injured, and it just, pick your best, pick a fit 11 in their best positions. That's kind of how I see it. Next question came from Martin McCluskey at Clusky75. It's kind of along the same lines, but he's wrote, "Hi Stevie, if Rogic goes, rumours we might do a deal with Brighton for Duffy, or do we need to buy a similar type of player to replace Rogic?" Obviously, we've spoke about the Rogic replacement, but I've not seen much of Duffy, if I'm honest. I just know that he's people have described him as a big sort of hardy defender, got 30 odd caps for Ireland. It's a profile we need, that's for sure, but I'd like to think that we're looking beyond just this one guy that we're going to get, bent out of a barrel on the fee on,
Well, it seems to be that, I don't know if this was even possible, but apparently, obviously, we do know that talks are still ongoing, but potentially was it the game with his agent on Tuesday night, I think, and people were saying that, but I didn't know if that would be even possible under the current restrictions.
Nah, I think it was a lot of shite, to be honest.
So I thought, well, maybe it is that, maybe it getting closer, but I think, as you say, yeah, we need someone who's going to just kind of not rejuvenate the squad, because Duffy's not that type of player. Just it kind of makes Julian and I kind of look up and think, right, okay, this guy's came in, Premier League experience, 30 caps for his country, wears his heart on his sleeve, kind of tight profile. It would be good to have that sort of player in there. But I think we spoke about that last week as well.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be as well that this sort of deal and this transfer seems to drag its heels as well, a bit with Ayeti and a bit with Barkas and a bit with other, it just seems to be dragging its heels, and we're guilty of that.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly fire through these questions. I want to go into the final subject so we can sort of annoy people on wingers and stuff. So next one's in for Chris Harris at Harris_CCCC. I don't know what all that CCs mean. He's wrote, "Hi Stephen, 2 questions for me this week, so I'll do my best to fire through it. Are you worried about the continuous rumours regarding the pursuit of Tony? For me, if we go out and buy him for the rumoured price of $6.5 million, Eddie is gone. I can't see us going into a season with 5 strikers, even if we go with 2 strikers up front, I'm assuming he means, especially with the fees we have paid on the others. Like I said earlier, I think it might be more that Griffiths could be on the way out as opposed to Eddie. I just can't see Eddie leaving this summer. It's just, for me...
If we were to sell Eddie, it's absolutely criminal.
Celtic Park will burn.
Yeah. And I think this podcast would go mental that night as well.
I know. Eddie's going to go. I've already accepted it. It just can't be this season. His second question is more on formation. We've probably pretty much covered it. He's wrote, if we go 3-5-2, is Moy the natural player to play behind the strikers? I believe he is, but then leaves Brown and Cham and Christie for one of the other centre midfield places, as McGregor is a shoe-in the other position. So I don't agree with that. I think Christie can play wide left.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we could try. And if it doesn't work over a couple of games, then we could say, well, it doesn't appear to work the same way as it doesn't appear to him be working on from the right hand side. But I would like to see more of the 3-5-2 happening, and I don't think it will happen, but I'd like to hope we might try it on Saturday. I think it might just be a wee bit too quick to throw a Yeti or another striker in, but I would like to hope it would be certainly going towards a 3-5-2.
I've not touched on that yet. I just don't think there was any point. The guy's just off his holidays. He was on the beach 2 weeks ago. So I'm not even going to think of it. Talking about the last 10 minutes that he got, because
can't judge him on that. That's unfair. But I'd like to think, hopefully, he does get maybe a start on Saturday.
Yeah, possibly. So next question comes from Darren Grant at DJ Darren Grant. It's pretty much, we've covered pretty much all of it, but just kindness, I'll read it out. If Celtic get $4 million for Rogic, do you think the money should be reinvested in a midfield player such as Turnbull, or put towards a centre back like Duffy, who I've heard can be bought for $5 million plus? Thanks for the question, Dan. We've probably pretty much covered that in the previous. I'd probably answer yes to both. We could probably buy. I wouldn't be against buying both as long as it's not at the expense in Cham, or maybe even selling Ayer. So next question is from Lasagna Knees. Where the fuck do you get these names? At RY Gilbert 7. Hi mate for the podcast. What do you think of Turnbull? I personally like him, but perhaps sign and let him stay at Motherwell to get his fitness back up and join in January. That's actually a good shout, to be fair.
That is actually a very good shout to Lasagna Knees. Good wordplay there. I don't know why you came up with it, pal, but anyway,
I'm sure there's a reason for that.
I'm sure he'll tell us, but that would be a good option as long as we're not left out, as long as we're not caught out with too many. And if it is that case, then we'll just recall him from it. I think there's a very good player, and he has seemed to be coming onto a game. I think the first game against Ross County, a bit all over the place from what I've watched in that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would like to think we could get Turnbull in. If truth be told, I would like to see him come in, but as I say, we don't want it to be the expense of losing a big player.
So, that's all the questions for this week. So, final subject. Hugh Keevins had put out in his Twitter feed that he'd been speaking to Davy Provan, and he said, in his opinion, the best Celtic winger since Jinky Johnson. So, for me, Davy Provan retired just before I started getting into watching football. I've seen just the odd clip here and there, but I can't honestly say I've seen enough of Davy Provan to make that judgment call. So obviously, I'd asked people on Twitter to sort of give me their best wingers, wide men, if you want, since what they've witnessed in the flesh. So I'll quickly run through some of the names. Somebody actually wrote Brian McLaughlin, the wee guy for the 90s. He says when I was 13, he says it might be just my mind, but I thought he was amazing. Brian McLaughlin was good at dribbling, but he had a terrible final ball, to be honest. So I'll run through these. So there was Brian McLaughlin, McGeady, Di Canio, Alan Thompson, Nakamura, Paddy Roberts, Lubo, Forrest, Maloney, Samaras, Sinclair, Guppy, Silla, McCourt, Agat, Bobby Lennox, Bobby Pettit, Johnny Doyle, and Joe Miller. I've probably seen half of these guys. Di Canio for me was an absolutely tremendous player, but we won nothing under him. We struggled to beat Rangers. We won one. We won the cup game, but lost the 4 league games that season. Now, I'm not saying it's all down to him. It's probably down to Stuart Kerr and Gordon Marshall, to be honest. But for me, all the wingers out of that list of wide men, wing backs, I'm going to go with Alan Thompson. And the reason I'm going to go with Alan Thompson is not that. And this is obviously just me. I never seen, Bobby Lennox in the flesh. This is based on what I've seen in the flesh. For me, Alan Thompson, he'd over 220 games for Celtic. He had nearly 60 goals. He is the epitome for me of a big game player. The amount of big games he turned up and scored away at Liverpool, away at Stuttgart, away at Munich, at Ibrox numerous times, at Celtic Park against Rangers numerous times. The guy was just a tremendous wing back. I thought for what we got him for nearly 3.8 million, I think it was. 3.8 million for Bolton, wasn't it? So we got him for Villa actually. He was actually Aston Villa.
Aston Villa, sorry. Aye.
I just think he wasn't. I don't think he was necessarily the most skillful out of all these guys. But I just think for a 4-year period, I thought the guy was absolutely tremendous.
Thompson had one of the best left pegs I've ever seen.
Yes.
And he came on, and I think his debut was against Wraith Rovers in the League Cup and scored with a back heel. I think.
Probably.
I think it was a 4-0 victory that night, and ever since then, he just kicked on from there. And I tell you, when we had a free kick in a promising area, there was a good chance it could go in.
Yeah.
And honestly, some of his crosses were just fantastic. And the way, when you got a free kick, 30, 40, whatever, the way he could just flight it in for Larson, Hartson or something, or somebody just to be there.
Scored the winner against Barcelona and the 1-0 win at home.
To be fair, that's a very underrated goal, I think.
Yeah. There's a story about when Sven-Goran Eriksson came to watch him when he was the England manager against Rangers, and I think we were 2-0 up and there was like 10 minutes to go, and apparently Sven had sort of left early. I think he left about a minute before Alan Thompson cracked a free kick in for about 30 yards right in the top corner off the underside of the bar. So it was just his luck. He got one cap for England, and he said it himself that he probably shouldn't have played that night because he was wasn't fully fit, but he didn't want to turn down the opportunity, getting a cap. So fair play to him. But for me, he did kind of start as a wing back, but I think he got more as a right back, to be fair.
Yeah. And I think it is easy, but it was someone said Agat to me, and I thought, it is a good shout, because with Agat in his first couple, the pace he had on him, and that goal against Ajax where he just got away from
frightening.
But it's the ball from Larson as well makes that. But when he came through, and for 50 grand as well, it's an absolute fab.
Aye, that's people talk about, obviously the Larson deal was value for money, but the Agat deal for 50 grand is that's daylight robbery, man. The guy was tremendous, but I think he was a striker at Hibs briefly, and we put him out wide. Yeah, but the game, I think the home game against Juventus, if you ever watch that game, he absolutely annihilated their fullback that day. He was unbelievable, almost unplayable.
Because there was highlights just after lockdown that was brought up on us, and BT Sport had put on 4 or 5 different Celtic, and Agat that night was absolutely fantastic. But a special mention also has to go to Moravcik that night as well.
Yes. As a number 10, I seen Lubo more as a number 10 than a winger, and I thought Lubo that night was unplayable.
Lubo for me it will always be my hero of Celtic, because he's just the person that you want, because he could just hit a ball for about 30 yards, and the power that he could generate on it was just, it's just, for me, it's the way I would have, if I was to ever have played football, that's the way I would have loved to have played.
Yeah.
You know, because that's just, I just love a person, a player who can just hit a ball with ferocity, and the way he could curve a ball, and we could be here all day with Lubo. He was my hero. People will say Larson, but Lubo will always be my hero.
See, I'm starting to doubt myself now, because I've picked Thompson, but I'm thinking of Gat, and I'm thinking about that away game at Stuttgart when he ran past the guys if he wasn't there, you know, and for the goal that Sutton scored. Yeah. But he also set up Thompson with a cross, and I think it was his cross that led to Thompson's diving header that night, and then obviously he'd set up Larson with the first goal in the final, and obviously then Thompson set up the second one with his corner kick. So, you know, between the two of them, I'd probably just have Thompson, just because he played sort of wide left the whole time, whereas Agat went fullback. What about yourself out of that sort of list of names that I ran through? Obviously, you're a slightly younger chap than myself, so.
Well, what I done was, obviously, I put the list to my dad, and he's of a Johnson fan. Always will be, but given he is in his 60s,
I've clearly no mentioned Jimmy Johnson within this, because I think there's no point, because it is clear that he is the ultimate number one winger for Celtic. So I was hoping for just names out with him that other people had seen. So,
but anyway, to me, I think Thompson, yes, he was a fantastic player, but and it's back to was he a winger, was he a number 10 more? But Nakamura is just. The free kick against Man United, and any free kick that he's ever scored, every one of them were just fantastic. There wasn't one of them you would say, oh well, that was a poor free kick, but it's still, every one of them was absolutely pinpoint accuracy. And some of the goals that he scored along the way, I mean, the one against Rangers, the banana shot, I mean, that is just a fantastic goal that he scored.
Yeah.
But to me, that he was fantastic in that respect. But
his debut against Dundee United at home was one of the best debuts I've ever seen in a Celtic player. He was unplayable that day. Celtic won 2-0 that day, but he was absolutely tremendous.
He nearly scored with a diving header in about the first 10 minutes.
I think so. I think you're right, actually.
And then he scores, and John Hartson scored that day.
And obviously there's that league winner down at Kilmarnock as well, the free kick.
I mean, you just sensed that something was going to happen. And I think in that year, and I was surprised at this, that year he picked up 7 Player of the Year awards.
Really? I didn't know that.
And I never knew there was 7 Player of the Year awards possible. But
yeah,
he won them all that year. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, I think there's a goal in that season, I think it was against Dundee United, and we're 2-0 down, and we just get the goal back through Darren O'Dea, and he chips the keeper from about 20 yards.
Yeah.
It's Boxing Day, and it's at home, and he said he saw it, and then he chipped it. I'm sure people will remember the goal as well, but for me, Nakamura was one of the best players I've ever seen. Back to Moravcik, when not many players could trap the ball with their arse against Hearts. That was quite something. But I mean, I think the game that he will always be forever remembered is just where he scored his 2 goals at Ibrox and literally turned Rickson inside out that day.
Yeah.
And it is 2 great goals, but the second one is just fantastic. A lovely flick from Maloney. He's literally going down. He turns Rickson, and what a goal. With regards to anybody else, I mean, the amount of names that I was coming up with, I mean, Samaras, you know.
I think his debut, he was playing out wide right and ran down the wing, cut inside and stuck it away at Kilmarnock, didn't he?
That was in the cup, if I'm.
That was the cup game, aye.
And as you say, with his orange boots, and we're thinking, who we got here? You know, he was a good player, but the first couple of seasons he did blow hot and cold.
If Steve Paddy McCourt had Callum McGregor's fitness, he would have been a world beater.
Aye, and that's another one I had. And people, like, I was speaking to my mates last night. I says, I'm going to put McCourt in, and they were like, why are you putting McCourt in? I says, if you look at the goals that he scored, albeit he didn't score that many, but there's one against Inverness, I think it was the same weekend as when the referees went on strike, and he takes it from about the not so really much the halfway, but he must be about 5 or 6 players, and makes it look so easy. The same one against St Mirren the season before, and
he just had this ability over a 3-yard burst, didn't he? Just to get past players when you thought it was impossible.
Exactly, and it's just that there's times you're just thinking, if you just kept your fitness and just didn't like a pint of Guinness as much, you would have been a fantastic.
Yeah. I hope he's not a fan of this podcast, because I'll be getting a message at some point.
Well, I mean, I've got nothing against anybody liking a pint of Guinness. I like a pint myself, but I'm just saying, I think there is certainly. I'm not saying there's a regret in his life, but he will just see it as he scored a goal for Celtic, which is what most of us love to do. But I think, as you say, if he had Callum McGregor's fitness, what a player we would have had.
Definitely. So
the other real one I had was Paddy Roberts.
I'd say for the sort of Christmas onwards, or just before Christmas onwards, in Roger's first season, I thought he was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're going to call it a night at that. Just quickly before we go, I'm just getting a text message from my missus.
Just the doghouse already?
No, the dogs have been fine, I think. No, because the wee man's got to go to his bed, so he's got school in the morning. So, score prediction for this weekend against Dundee United?
I'm going to go for 2-1. That's what I'm going for.
2-1. I'm going to go for a pretty straightforward 3-0 Celtic. I'm glad to see Dundee United back in the league. I think they're a proper Scottish Premiership club.
Deserve to be in the league and good away ground. Certainly, and certainly I'll be looking forward to my seat in the pub, which I've had to book, which is something weird and wonderful, but hopefully I'll be able to watch it there and hopefully we get a good result.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Kevin, once again, just want to say thanks for joining me, and hopefully enjoy the game on Saturday, and hopefully get you back on again next week.
Yeah, I'll be here, and thank you very much for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Catch you later.
No worries. Bye-bye.
And they gave us James McRory and Paul McStay. They gave us Johnston, Tully, Murdoch,